Today's leading news stories, as reported by the IBA English News, focus on several very tragic issues. First, you're going to see how terrorists continue to cause the suffering of their own people in Gaza. They are literally biting the hand that feeds them. Secondly, terrorists in southern Gaza managed to kill a member of an elite IDF army unit. He was from a Druze village in the Galilee, a non-Jewish religious group who are known for their bravery and loyalty to Israel. You'll learn more about these very special people. Finally, we take a look at the change in Polish attitudes towards Israel. Poland is known for its anti-Semitism during the Holocaust. So stay tuned for my biblical perspectives on these issues and prayer points. You, out there, can make a difference in the world right now. Remember, love never fails.
Good evening and welcome to IBA News, coming to you from Jerusalem. In today's top story, a terror attack on the Nachalos terminal on the Gaza border this afternoon. 2 Israelis were killed when 4 Palestinian terrorists stormed the border crossing where fuel is piped into the Gaza Strip. The victims were workers at the facility. IDF forces pursued the terrorists back into Gaza, and there are unconfirmed reports that 1 was killed. Army sources said the attack may have been an attempt to kidnap an Israeli citizen or soldier. Following the incident, rescue workers struggled to reach the 2 critically injured men as the Palestinians, several of them carrying machine guns and grenades, opened fire. Residents of nearby kibbutz Nachalos were ordered to stay in their houses until the terrorist threat was eliminated. The attack occurred after the latest delivery of fuel into Gaza funded by the European Union. There were also Palestinian mortar attacks on the area following the incident. Palestinian observers say they saw IDF tanks crossing over into Gaza. The Islamic Jihad, the Popular Resistance Committees, and the Mujahideen brigades associated with Fatah are claiming responsibility. However, government officials in Jerusalem placed the blame for the attack on Hamas. They say the infiltration was carefully planned and could not have occurred without the full complicity of that terror organization. The Air Force struck a vehicle in northern Gaza in which terrorists involved in the incident were apparently driving. Palestinians report that there were injuries in that attack. And more deadly violence in Gaza earlier today. Staff Sergeant Saif Bissan, an IDF soldier from an elite unit, was killed overnight during a mission in the southern Gaza Strip. 2 other soldiers were lightly wounded, and a Palestinian terrorist was killed. We get more on this report from IBA's Aaron Viner.
IDF soldiers of the Egoz Reconnaissance Unit were operating overnight in a routine mission in search of Palestinian terror infrastructure near the Kisufim crossing. This in response to recent shooting attacks and other anti-Israel activity in the vicinity of the border fence. The troops came under gun and anti-tank missile fire after encountering a group of Palestinian gunmen. Staff Sergeant Saif was killed and 2 others were lightly wounded in the ambush. All were evacuated to Beershova's Soroka Hospital. The funeral for the 21-year-old staff sergeant is due to begin 1 hour from now in the Upper Galilee Druze village of Jat. Mourners have streamed to the family home of Israel's fallen soldier throughout the day. The IDF launched 2 airstrikes against the terrorists. Hamas confirmed the death of 1 of its operatives and the wounding of 4 others. The night raid continued until dawn, and some 10 Palestinians were detained by security forces for questioning. A senior source in the Prime Minister's office told IBA News today that last night's attack is proof that the relative recent quiet in the south is simply a mirage. Meanwhile, Egyptian security officials have increased the level of alert at the Rafah border to high. Hamas yesterday issued a threat to again smash through the shared border as it did in February if Israel and Egypt continue to enforce the embargo against the Strip. Thousands of Egyptian troops are now poised to repel a potential Palestinian attack. This is Aaron Viner for IBA News.
And Jerusalem was placed on top alert this morning following intelligence warnings of an impending terror attack on the city. Police stopped traffic at the entrance to the capital as they searched for suspects and weapons. Border police also stepped up security on Jerusalem's southern and northern borders. Traffic on Highway 1 ground to a halt. Security services conducted spot checks. Delays reached upwards of an hour and a half. The alert was lifted this afternoon. The largest home front drill ever conducted in this country continued for its fourth day today. Today's exercise simulated 3 different scenarios. In Tel Aviv, policemen dressed up as terrorists infiltrated by sea and hijacked a bus. In Jaffa, a simulation of a missile strike on a residential building in which emergency forces practiced rescuing residents trapped beneath the rubble. And in Haifa this afternoon, emergency services simulated a missile strike on an ammonia tanker which dispersed the poisonous gas through populated areas. The Ministry of Environment practiced containing the dangerous incident. Deputy Defense Minister Matan Vilnai, who observed the drill, said that our enemies are threatening us with missile attacks because they know they cannot defeat us in battle. A 3-alarm fire in Petach Tikva today, one of the nightmare scenarios being practiced as part of the home front drill this week, turned into reality as a home for the elderly, Givat HaShlosha, burst into flames. Firefighters from Petach Tikva and surrounding towns rushed to the scene. They managed to rescue the residents, many of whom fled to the roof to escape the smoke and flames. 20 of the elderly residents were lightly injured by smoke inhalation. 14 of them were evacuated to nearby Beilinson Hospital. The firefighters were eventually able to extinguish the blaze. Shockwaves still rock the country in the Moshe Katsav affair. The fallen president yesterday threw out the plea bargain deal he had originally agreed to. IBA's Leah Stern has this update.
There is shock and confusion in Israel's justice system today in the wake of former President Katzav's bombshell announcement that he is reneging on the plea bargain he had originally agreed to. Instead, Katzav's lawyers say they will now go to trial in an attempt to prove Katzav's innocence in his sex scandal case. The ramifications of that decision could come back to haunt the ex-president. Sources in the Attorney General's office say they plan to move forward with the gravest charge in the case, which is rape. That means Katzav, if found guilty, could face years behind bars. Katzav and his lawyers, however, insist that he is innocent and that will come to light when they have their day in court. The case first hit snags when Attorney General Menachem Mezuz suggested that testimony from the original woman in the president's office who claimed Katzav raped her may not stand up in court. But today that woman, known only as Aleph, said she is ready to stand up in court and testify against the former president. Her attorney, Eldad Yaniv, says that police never held a face-to-face confrontation between Aleph and Katzav. When that happens in court, Yaniv believes the judge will believe her. On the other hand, some observers have suggested that the entire case may be thrown out completely because proving the charges against Katzav in a court of law may prove difficult. Protesters from women's rights groups who had petitioned the High Court of Justice against the plea bargain deal welcomed the opportunity given to the plaintiffs to prove their claims in front of a judge. Members of the women's group stood outside the court Tuesday as Katzav entered, chanting "rapist" and "go to prison now, Katzav." After the hearing, one of Katzav's lawyers challenged the women, saying, "You wanted a trial, now you'll have one." There are reports that former President Katzav or the attorneys representing him are planning to hold a press conference tomorrow. This is Leah Stern for IBA News.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is visiting the country to kick off the year of Polish culture in Israel and met today with President Shimon Peres and Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Tusk said that, quote, "The greatness of our peoples is that despite history, we have learned to talk about the present and also about the future. Although history has often been a curse for both Poles and Jews, Poland is deeply interested in building a common future with Israel." President Peres said that Israel can never forget the horrors of the Holocaust, but called today's meeting a new beginning. The Polish Prime Minister has said that he hopes Israeli youngsters who visit Poland in their thousands to tour the Auschwitz death camp will begin seeing other aspects of his country as well. At a press conference with Prime Minister Olmert this afternoon, the Polish Premier said that Israel will never find a more faithful and trustworthy spokesman in the European Union than his country. He added that Poland would be a staunch advocate in the war on terror. Olmert said he hoped the two countries would strengthen their ties. And joining us now from our Tel Aviv studio is Professor Shevach Weiss, former Speaker of the Knesset and former Israeli ambassador to Poland. Professor Weiss, thanks for coming in this evening. There have been reports over the past several days that the Polish Prime Minister's own father was a Nazi soldier during World War II. Does that cast a shadow over his visit and over relations between the two countries? Professor Weiss, can you hear me now?
I don't hear it.
Professor Weiss, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I'm hearing.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Professor Weiss, there have been reports over the past few days that the Polish Prime Minister's father was a Nazi soldier during World War II. Does that cast a shadow over his visit and over relations between the two countries?
As we know, the grandfather of Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, he was a member of Wehrmacht. You know, they came from Gdańsk, from the corridor. In Gdańsk they had Polish and German and Volksdeutsche. We don't know, we haven't any information about a Nazi activity of his grandfather.
Do those rumors, though, cast doubts on the relationship between the two countries, and will they affect those relationships?
I don't think, because, you know, Donald Tusk, he belongs to the new generation of Polish leaders, one of the fighters of the rebellion of Solidarność, and he was very active in the parliamentary same group of friendship and renewing of relationships between Poland and Israel. He is very pro-Israeli, as one who was elected especially by the young generation. He is also the symbol, as our president said to him, and as we have told this morning by Donald Tusk, the vision to future, to do something to renew the bridges between our two nations, seeing before us the importance of future.
Professor Weiss, you and your family, you were saved from the Nazis during the war by Christians, but you fled that country because of anti-Semitism after the war. Then you returned there as Israel's ambassador and became a culture hero in that country. Do you see if there is still anti-Semitism in Poland?
You know, from my point of view, analyzing the history of Poland during, before and after the Holocaust, Europe as whole is a lake of frozen Jewish blood, all Europe. From the point of view of cooperation with the Nazis, I think that Poland was, from many points of view, a victim of Nazis. But as we know, in Poland, before the war, during, and especially after the war, we felt traditional Catholic extreme anti-Semitism, but today, I know that we have until today a marginal anti-Semitism, but today, to be anti-Semitic in Poland, it means to be a primitive and non-cultural. From this point of view, I think that after many years of break diplomatic relationships and of Poland was and is for us the place of agony, of killing sites, of our tragedy. But from many points of view, when I analyze the history of the Dutch and Croatian and Lithuanian and Ukrainian, their cooperation with the Nazi regime was terrible. And in Poland we have also many righteous among the nations. And I think that after all, after 63 years after the war, it's very important to do something for the future
of those relationships between the two countries. Professor Shevach Weiss, thanks so much for joining us this evening and sharing your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you also.
Now to a very different subject, the surprise decision by former President Moshe Katsav to cancel his plea bargain deal over his alleged sexual harassment charges. I'm pleased to welcome to our studio Jane Jacobs of the Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel. Hi. Thanks for coming in this evening, Jane. Your organization and other women groups have petitioned against the plea bargain deal with the former president. Now that it's been canceled, will the women's groups remain involved as the legal process unfolds?
Absolutely. We've been involved from the first moment, and we have no intention of backing out at this point. We'll see it through to the very end alongside all the other women's groups that are involved in the coalition, either informally or formally.
Jane, what do you think about Katsav's decision to go to trial?
I personally admire that decision. The Association of Rape Crisis Centres generally feels it's too little too late, but we're confident that something will unfold now that we can work with.
What do you think the court procedure will mean to the women who were allegedly abused by President Katsav?
I think that it's extremely meaningful meaningful for them on many levels. I think above all it will be good for them to feel that somebody is finally taking them seriously and that they'll be able to make their voices heard.
That being said, though, Jane, the women will have to stand up in court and tell their stories, and they risk being questioned, being interrogated, and even at times humiliated, taken apart by the prosecution. They're going to be torn to shreds in some incidents, unfortunately. How do you think this is going to affect women who want to come forward, who want to complain, who want to file complaints? Will this deter them from coming forward?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I don't think there's much left to tear to shreds. The media have already given them a good run for their money in that respect. But I don't think it will deter other women, no. I think actually it was more of a deterrent when the state and the state prosecutor was seen to not be taking the cases seriously. And now that suddenly there's more legitimacy towards this, I think more and more women will be encouraged to call. Certainly from our hotlines, we've noticed a surge in calls since Katsav reneged on his decision.
There's certainly, though, a difference between a surge in calls to an organization like your own and women that are willing to go to the police and go into court and testify that they've been abused, don't you think?
Yes, there's absolutely a difference, and that's the thing with our hotline. We do not at any stage press anybody to do anything they don't want to do. We support the woman from the moment she calls the hotline. If she just wants a listening ear, then we'll be there for her. If she wants to go to the police, we'll explain the options, and we will explain as well that there isn't necessarily a very high chance that she will see what she perceives to be justice, but we'll be there for her whatever happens.
Was your organization surprised by the plea bargain deal, and were you surprised that Katsav decided not to sign off on that in the end?
Surprised is a word. I think disappointed would be a better word, and I think...
with the charges or with his decision?
We were disappointed with the whole system. We were disappointed as well that we've been waiting for this essentially since June, and there's a lot of state funds, time, energy, resources that have gone into working towards this goal, which could have happened so many months ago.
Jane Jacobs of the Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel, thanks for being on IBA News.
Thank you.
In other news, a top-ranking Saudi official was involved in the assassination of Hezbollah warlord Imad Murnia. This according to the official Iranian news agency Faris. According to the report, the official, who serves in the Saudi Arabian embassy in Damascus, purchased 2 cars which were blown up as part of the assassination attempt. The news agency reported that Israel was behind the assassination, though the operation involved Jordanian, Syrian, and Palestinian citizens. Now to the controversy sparked by a comment from Reform Judaism heads in the United States, Rabbi Eric Yaffe. Yaffe told supporters last week not to cooperate with Zionist evangelical Christians like Pastor John Hagee, who said Yaffe are harming the peace process. Yaffe's comments shock many Christians who have made support for Israel a keystone of their agenda. With me now is David Brogue, the right-hand man of Pastor Hagee and current executive director of Christians United for Israel. Thanks for coming in this evening, David.
Pleasure to be with you.
What is your reaction to Rabbi Yaffe's comments?
One of deep sadness and disappointment. Judaism teaches us that what we say publicly about someone, public humiliation of someone, it's serious. It's as if you killed that person. Judaism also teaches us to be very wary of rumor and gossip. It's a sin to gossip. Lashon hara. I'm afraid what Rabbi Yaffe did, and I hope unintentionally, was to publicly assassinate the character of a very good man, John Hagee, on the basis of gossip and nothing more than gossip. He got his basic facts wrong.
But isn't it true that your movement does adopt a right-wing view to the peace process?
No, actually it's not true. We've been very clear from the very beginning. The existential issues of war and peace, of a two-state solution, territorial concessions, these are difficult choices that must be made by the Israelis and the Israelis alone. And we stand firmly for that proposition. When we as an organization, CUFI, have intervened in the peace process, it's been for one purpose and one purpose only. And that is to tell our government, the United States, not to pressure Israel to make concessions that Israel herself does not wish to make. We want the Israelis to be able to make these decisions on their own. We respect Israel's democracy. If Rabbi Yaffe or others want American pressure on Israel, want America to force Israel's hand to do what she does not wish to do, then I would assert it is they who lack respect for Israel's democracy, not we.
Professor Yaffe also spoke about your position on gay rights and abortions. Isn't it legitimate for Rabbi Yaffe to take issue with those positions if he disagrees with them?
It is absolutely legitimate for him to do so. However, let's be clear about what we're talking about. If he is talking about Christians united for Israel, we take no positions on those issues. We are a single-issue organization devoted to standing with Israel and her people during difficult times. If he wants to take issue with some of our leaders, one of whom is John Hagee, he is within his rights to do so. But then I would ask this: is the fact that John Hagee is opposed to gay marriage a reason not to work with him where we do agree on the issue of Israel? I would humbly assert that decent, good people differ on the issue of gay marriage, and that you have many good Orthodox rabbis and Christian pastors who are opposed to it. That is a legitimate disagreement. It should not delegitimize them as partners in standing with Israel, especially when Israel has so few friends.
David, the evangelical Christians, especially your organization, have proved to be loyal, steadfast supporters of the State of Israel. Are you afraid that Yafi's comments may have a negative effect on some members of your group?
The beautiful thing about the members of my group is that they believe they need to stand with Israel because it is God's will and it's the right thing to do. And they'll do it whether the Jewish people appreciate it or not. I'm not worried about the Christians. I'm worried about the Jews. Because we have an obligation of hakarat tov. Biblically, we have to recognize when people do good things for us, when people stand with us, when it would be easier for them not to. And we're the ones who are failing in that mitzvah, in that duty of hakarat tov, when instead of coming to a man like John Hagee and saying, "Sir, I might disagree with you on some issues, but on this issue, thank you for what you're doing for us." Instead of doing that, when we give him a slap in the face, we fail. I worry about us, not about them.
David Brogue, Executive Director of Christians United for Israel, thanks so much for being our guest this evening.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sports news now. Israeli coach Avram Grant has guided his English Premier League team, Chelsea, through to the Champions League semifinals. This after Chelsea beat Turkey's Fenerbahce 2-0 last night at Stamford Bridge. Grant's squad will face Liverpool in the semifinals for the third time in 4 years. Liverpool is undefeated with 7 straight Champions League wins. Chelsea overcame a 1-goal deficit from last week's game in Turkey.
רגיעה בסטמפורד ברידג', מתח לכל אורך הדרך כי צ'לסי לא מוצאת את השער השני. זהו מיכאל אסיין, ועמדת המגן הימני, ועכשיו 3 דקות לסיום.
I'm optimistic by nature, if I can say that. I believe that when I received the team and it was after a draw against Rosenborg here, and we was, I think, in the league, I don't know even how many points we was behind, with 5 teams before us. Then, if you remember, I said to you that I believe that we can do good things this year. So now when we are close, of course.
Local money matters. Shares were up all across the board on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange in late afternoon trading, while the shekel strengthened against all major foreign currencies. You're looking at the numbers. Turning to the weather, and a sharp rise in temperatures tomorrow with hazy conditions in the south of the country. There may even be light rainfalls in the north. You're looking at the highs and lows. And that's all for today. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time on this same channel. Until then, thanks for watching. Have a great evening, and shalom from Jerusalem.